back over what you were talking about in terms of the holiday season and
Oh, sure.
how it is looking at last year and what that may or may not mean for this year. Sorry.
Okay. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Excellent. So yeah, the data we make available covers an entire year of eBay transactions and listings, outcomes, sellers, all of the details about every transaction. So we have really the hard data on what's happening on one of the largest e-commerce platforms in the world, and one that's really proven to be indicative because it's not a specialized platform. It's a very general platform with a wide variety of products, wide variety of sellers, wide variety of shoppers. And using that data, sellers can go back and see, yes, what has happened a holiday season ago, but also what's happened yesterday or the day before, what's going on this week with a particular product or in a particular category. And very often this reveals very important information because sometimes last holiday season sales numbers are indicative of a product that's going to be hot again this holiday season, but at least as often after a holiday season is done, what we see is that a product sort of falls off the radar, so that very often the holiday season is the last hurrah for a product that has been hot, and in the months between two holiday seasons, we'll see that product disappear. So it's really important to move beyond just having the sales numbers for last Christmas, last December, if a seller really wants to understand what supply and demand looks like for a product, what are the risks, what are the likely quantities and prices, what they need is data on how that product is doing now versus just seeing last holiday season's numbers.
Yeah. I don't want to go into like bizarre analogies, but sometimes it seems to me like it would be picking up, to base this holiday season on last holiday season, be a little bit like picking up a map from 1850 and trying to drive across California. A lot has changed.
Exactly. Yeah, products move in cycles. This is particularly true in today's world, which is really driven by brands and the entertainment industry and a lot of what goes on in media. Everybody knows that there are things that are trending, and that when something is trending, it's hot, and there are things at the same time that stop trending. And so, while the essentials may always see consistent sales from holiday to holiday, there are always going to be Christmas lights being sold, for example. For things that are really about gifts and consumer products and products that are in demand for everyday fun, entertainment, everyday life, those things change from year to year. And sometimes a cycle runs 2 or 3 years. Sometimes a cycle burns itself out in the space between two holiday seasons. And a lot of what sellers have traditionally relied on has been last holiday's numbers or predictions from analysts, which are made, by extrapolating results from a 1 or 2 month period very often. And that can be useful, but very often it's also risky. We can see those predictions fall flat again and again and again when we see the data that happens over the course of the year. And by getting data that's current, sellers can find out, is a product still strong? Is it likely to be strong this holiday season? If it's still strong in August, or has it completely disappeared, or have sales tanked over the course of the year, which probably indicates that it's not coming back for December.
Right. So you mean my plan to get my wife a nice Sony Discman, that's not the hot thing anymore?
It's probably not, although we recently ran some sales numbers on classic technology devices, and it turns out that Walkmen of various stripes are seeing a resurgence in popularity, and that's interesting because they didn't necessarily see any recent holiday spikes, but over the last few months we've seen increases in sales in things like tape Walkmen and CD Walkman. So it may still be a good plan. I should mention, by the way, that your audio is a little staticky. So
sorry to hear that.
If you're planning to use your audio, you might want to take a look at it really quickly.
Yeah, I was hoping to. Maybe I'll have to dub it. Another language.
Cool. All right.
I don't know why that would be, but I'm moving electronics away from it. See if that helps. But is there anything you can talk to me about in terms of trends you see coming? I know you mentioned that in your email, but I'm not sure how you do that.
Well, what I can talk about is maybe some things that that are likely to be hot this year, and then some things that people have maybe thought were hot or that have been predicted to be hot
Okay.
that our numbers for the summer don't suggest will actually be hot. So probably the category of most interest recently that we've seen, we've had a lot of questions about this, is the category of drones. Everybody wants to know what's going on with drones. You know, is this a one-time explosion in sales and interest that's over? Is this blown out of proportion and actually there aren't that many out there? Or is it really going to be a big holiday seller? What our numbers tell us.
I just hope that my neighbor doesn't get one.
Or crash one into your house, right? We're seeing more and more stories about drone accidents and drone violence in weird ways. But you know, the numbers tell us that this is probably not an overblown thing. Drone sales are continuing to increase rather dramatically. The plateau for this summer that we've seen is about $1 million in drone sales weekly, which is a lot. That's about double what last summer's plateau was, and it's actually not that far away from last year's holiday peaks. So it looks like if the trends continue to hold up through the rest of the summer and fall, and right now, like I said, they're at a kind of a plateau of about $1 million a week in sales, we're going to see a peak that exceeds that for the holiday season, and we're going to see a lot more drones out there. There already millions of units have been shipped on eBay alone, so drones are pretty big. Another product that has been talked about endlessly recently and that people have asked us about, people seem to be curious about, are smartwatches. The Apple Watch this year made a lot of news. There were a lot of predictions about how it was going to sell and whether or not this is the next big product category. And what we found there is actually pretty interesting. And this is where having real data comes in handy. Apple Watch sales did explode early on, right? We saw them go from nothing prior to the release to something in the neighborhood of $2.5 million a week for a moment in late April. After that, sales have essentially collapsed. By the time we reach mid to late summer, we're down in the neighborhood of maybe $750,000 weekly. So that's a decline on the order of 70 or 80%, and the trend line is downward. So Apple Watch sales are not looking good.
Units or watches?
Say that again?
Was the current figure 750,000 watches?
$750,000 a week. So that's considerably fewer than that number in actual watches, because the Apple Watch is actually one of the more expensive products in this segment. At the same time, that's not to say that the smartwatch category is dead. It turns out that Android-based smartwatches are outselling Apple Watches in terms of units, and their trend line is upward. The plateau for Android smartwatches over the summer is about double what it was last summer, and sales are continuing to grow. So it looks like we're going to have a pretty decent holiday peak. Best guess, based on the numbers that we have, would be that it's going to be in the range of $1 million weekly in Android smartwatches during the holiday season, and that category looks to be growing. So what it looks like is that consumers are actually opting for less expensive Android smartwatches rather than the more expensive Apple smartwatch. They actually have appreciated the concept of the smartwatch. They're just choosing a less expensive product, and that's the kind of area where it's an instance of data being useful in making these kinds of decisions. The media has tended to talk about this category as sort of an all or nothing proposition, and to use the Apple Watch as an indicator. If you just look at Apple Watch sales, if you look at the first couple of weeks sales, you might think that this is going to be a great year for the Apple Watch during the holidays. That's probably not going to be true, because looking at the summer sales, they're dismal. At the same time, if you have consumed the media that says that the Apple Watch sales are collapsing, you might think that smartwatches are a really bad bet for this holiday season, when in fact there are parts of the smartwatch category that are actually in good shape, and Android watches are probably that category. It's also worth pointing out that there are still other kinds of watches. In general, watches, traditional watches with hands or that just tell you the time, are a much bigger category on eBay. They do about 140 million in sales a year, which dwarfs either Android or Apple Watch sales. And it's a really stable category that sees a big spike every holiday season. So for those that are carrying timepieces already, it might make more sense just to stay where they are and follow the holiday trends. And looking at the data right now, we can see that that category is stable. It's probably going to perform just as well as it did last year. It might not make any sense to even move into smartwatches if you're already doing well selling timepieces in general.
Well, that's pretty interesting. Is there? You just said it's a stable category, but the more traditional watches, is there any way to talk about what happened since the introduction of the Apple Watch? Did that affect regular old watches?
We're seeing some manufacturers, Fossil just mentioned that they're seeing some decline in demand, but across the category as a whole, traditional watches that just tell time look to be stable. So we're not seeing big declines in sales in indication there at all. It looks like people are still buying watches just about as much as they always did. That probably suggests that the people who are purchasing Apple Watches or Android smartwatches are early adopters and people who like gadgets much more than people who are looking for a watch.
Right, right. I think what I might do is design a watch that looks an awful lot like an Apple Watch and just sell it with hands or whatever.
Sell it with hands, right? And if you sell it at a good price point, it might just sell.
Exactly. So the one thing, I'll ask you one thing that to me seems a little counterintuitive, or maybe it just shows my lack of understanding. I guess if I were looking at trends and even if something was increasing in sales, some product, I might think, well, that means it's headed to some saturation point, and so it wouldn't be probably a hot product come November, even October.
Sure. Well, the great thing about having data of the kind that Terapeak has is that we can see what the sales are doing every day. So it's true that at some point you always expect that there's going to be a saturation point that, as we mentioned earlier, there are things that are trending and things that are not. And once something is not, sales are going to start to fall off a little bit. But the great thing about having data that comes in every day that sellers can access and see real sales volume numbers, pricing numbers for, is that they can spot on a day-over-day basis or week-over-week basis, and we give them the flexibility to sort of select their time frames and their comparison periods. They can spot those inflection points as soon as they happen. So if somebody is looking at the trends for August and they look good for a product and they're thinking, okay, this is going to be great for the holiday season, everything is looking up, and they go into to begin to strategize and source this product, they're going to add it to their inventory, they're planning a marketing push, et cetera. If they start to see 10 days or 2 weeks or 3 weeks during which sales level off or begin to fall a little bit with no particular explanation, our data lets them be light enough on their feet to say, okay, maybe we'll source a few less of those. Right, okay. So that they can monitor things very closely on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, nobody knows what's going to happen in the future, and that's really why we're here. But it's much more effective, and it's a much better move for minimizing risk and maximizing the ability to sell effectively in the marketplace. To be able to watch day by day how a product is trending and selling, and to sort of be able to spot over the space of 10 or 15 days. An inflection point, rather than relying on a prediction that's an extrapolation from a month of sales 6 months ago, or rather than relying on last year's sales numbers, which probably have very little to do with what's going on right now in the marketplace.
Okay, that makes sense. In fact, it seems like there is a great advantage, of course, to being able to plan, say, now in August for your holiday season. But right. It seems there's even a greater advantage if during that season you can adjust based on what's actually happening in real time.
Exactly, and our sellers can see that. They can log in and see that unit volume is declining or average prices are declining. We can also show them that the number of bids is declining on auction listings. We can show them sort of how much shopper interest there is per item that sells, so that they can quickly sort of say, gosh, demand for this product is falling. It might be exhausted before we expected it to be exhausted, right? We might not reach that price point that we thought we were going to hit. And by using this data, they can be a step ahead, right? They can reprice before their competitors do. They can say, demand has fallen by 10%. We're going to cut our price by 10 or 15%. And we're going to move our inventory, maybe with a slightly lower margin, but we're going to be light on our feet and be able to move our inventory to the demand that remains. And other sellers who don't have that data, that maybe aren't as light on their feet, aren't able to see those trends and those inflection points happen on a day-by-day basis, they're going to be the ones left holding the inventory because they weren't able to reprice or adjust fast enough.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Let me go back, because I may have interrupted your story. You were talking about, you know, trends and what you guys have seen. You mentioned drones, watches, and that was very interesting. All the different categories. Was there anything else? You know, if there's not. But I've just been
sure. Yeah. There are some brands that have been in the news lately and that were really big last year. One thing we've been asked a lot about is Disney's Frozen. That was a massive seller for a decent number of months. And last holiday season, sales were really explosive in frozen goods. So there's, you know, because of the durability of the excitement about Anna and Elsa and the Frozen characters, and the fact that, you know, sales were in the neighborhood of almost $2 million weekly last holiday season in Frozen branded, you know, merchandise. There's been a kind of a question about is that going to hold up for this year? And some quarters there have been predictions that, you know, these are now beloved characters. They're going to probably do well again this holiday season. Our data going into the summer and through late summer this year tells the opposite story. The plateau for this summer is probably about a fourth of what it was last summer. There was a very steep fall off after this holiday season, and sales are continuing to decline week over week. So our best guess is that Frozen is kind of done. That's not to say that there aren't Disney brands that might do well. We pulled some numbers for some other brands, and as it turns out, there are a couple of sleepers that people maybe haven't been thinking about that look to be very interesting for holiday sellers this year. One of them is Star Wars, which is a really venerable brand. And it's easy to think about it as being stale because it's been out for so long. And, you know, George Lucas's 3 versions of the film have been dissected endlessly. And there's a kind of a presumption that it's, you know, it's one of those now durable but sleepy brands. And in fact, what we're seeing is that sales are increasing in anticipation of the film next year. It's going to be, actually, I think it's later this year that it's going to be released. And shopper interest is increasing. And actually, the sales numbers right now for that film, even in midsummer, are pretty good. We're looking in the neighborhood of $1.2 to $1.4 million weekly in Star Wars sales. And with the trend line moving upward, it's looking like there's a good chance for a very good holiday season for Star Wars, particularly associated with the release of the film. On a smaller scale, Ant-Man, which is a sort of niche film, if you will, very caters to the superhero and cosplay market. You know, you wouldn't expect too much excitement, but Ant-Man is seeing lots and lots of growth. Now, the numbers are still fairly small, right, on the order of $100,000 a week, but growth is incredibly steep, from virtually zero just in spring, at the end of April, to lots right now, to around $100,000 a week, and it shows no sign of slowing down. So for those who are interested in superheroes, it might make sense to take a look at some of those brands that are not like Frozen, right? That are not sort of the world-beating, heavily merchandised brands, particularly if sellers are looking for holiday sales opportunities. It might make sense to, you know, if you have access to a research platform like ours, to see what other brands are seeing really exceptional growth, and to see how many sellers are competing there, which we can also tell you. And if there's room, slide in and take advantage of some of that demand. Yeah. In terms of other things that we looked at, there's one that I kind of want to touch on because it's near and dear to my heart in a way because of the media coverage, and that's the selfie stick.
Oh yeah.
It became such a phenomenon. We saw selfie sticks everywhere for a number of months on social media, and the mainstream media picked up on it. Theme parks banned it, and at this point, there's been a kind of consensus that the selfie stick is over, and this is done. And it's also true that we didn't see a huge holiday spike last year for the selfie stick.
Could you introduce the selfie stick information?
Oh, the selfie stick.
Up a little bit. No, not what it
is.
But I kind of missed the whole thing you said about it.
Oh, well, it's, the selfie stick has been, it was everywhere on social media for a while. It was a huge, huge phenomenon. People were using them and then sharing pictures of their selfie sticks, which is, very sort of strange and ironic because obviously selfie sticks are to take pictures of yourself. So to have yourself taking a picture of a selfie stick is kind of hilarious. And then people began to ban them, and the mainstream media began to discuss them. And are they rude? And are they dangerous?
Yeah.
If you take them on the roller coaster, is it going to knock your phone off and bean somebody else in the head? And eventually, there's been a kind of consensus that it's done. That it had its flash in the pan, it's done. And it's true that we didn't see a huge holiday spike for selfie sticks last season. There was a little spike, but at the same time, what we can see in the data is a long, steady increase in selfie stick sales that is essentially continuing right now. There's been a slight plateau just over the last few weeks, but that plateau is higher than last year's holiday sales peaks. And it's not falling. Sales of selfie sticks are holding up. So it's entirely likely that if you sell these kinds of things, cell phone and smartphone accessories, it's going to be worth your while to stock up on a few selfie sticks if you get a good deal, because they'll probably sell. Despite what everyone is saying, people are still buying them. And the trend line looks good. And that's a great example of a product that people don't think about as a huge profit opportunity. No analyst would have said there's a huge boom in the sales of selfie sticks that represents lots and lots of dollars. But for sellers that are already positioned that way, the fact that there's an ongoing upward trend that's been there for an entire year and shows no sign of collapse probably says that that's worth adding to your inventory if you're already selling in that segment.
Hey, well, I have one, but
Ha!
So just to help me out a bit, your sales numbers that you've quoted, are those from eBay? Is that?
Yeah, these are based on the actual eBay transaction data, not a sample of it, based on all of it.
Right.
We receive that every day through eBay. We're not actually a part of eBay. We're not affiliated with eBay, except for through this partnership. That's a common misconception, is that eBay actually owns us, because how else could we get their data? But in fact, we have a partnership and a licensing deal that lets us see everything that's happened on eBay. So these are the actual sales numbers. This is how much stuff sold.
Okay. I have to give up my room, but I do have a couple other kind of nuts and bolts questions I was going to ask you.
Sure.
So I just wanted to make sure I understood your customers in the market. Those would be primarily eBay sellers. Is that the idea?
Those are our primary customers. I wouldn't say just eBay sellers. We cater to sellers of all stripes. They tend to be most often independent sellers or small businesses. So sellers that have a niche in online sales, or that have a particular product area or a particular region that they specialize in. They use us because eBay numbers are generally pretty indicative. Historically, the eBay numbers have been a better predictor of what's going to happen in e-commerce than any other single platform. So by having, I think I lost you there. Are you there? Uh-oh. Hello? Oh, I've got audio.
Great.
I heard that.
I was in a tinfoil wrapped room, I guess. Okay, well, that makes sense. Yeah. And are there, if I just wanted to poke around and maybe find some examples, I don't know if you talk about customers, but if I could just get a look at sort of what you're dealing with, would I go to the eBay marketplace maybe? Or?
Oh, well, actually, we have a great resource for that sort of can tell the story. If you go to our website.
I was going to say, it's called your website, right? I did take a look. I didn't dive into it. Sorry.
Yeah. So we actually, we have a series of customer bios. Let me give you the exact link, or at least how to get there. If you go to our website, there's a link at the top that says community. And if you click on community, you'll initially land on our blog, which is great. You should read it. But from there, you'll see a link that says customer stories. Okay. If you click on customer stories, we actually have a series of bios of users that have just volunteered to talk about their businesses, how they use Terapeak in their businesses, what they do with our data, and the kinds of things that they sell and the strategies that they have in the marketplace. And these are pretty representative. You'll find as you read through these that most of these are operations that are between, say, 1 and 10 people, probably skewed closer to the 1 to 2 than to the 10. And for the most part, most of them use our service in exactly this way. They get in, they look at the data. They usually have a focus area or a niche or some kind of expertise that they already have about products or market segments, and they use our data to essentially strategize, to plan sourcing and inventory strategy, pricing strategy, to identify new products that are likely to be selling well in the coming weeks, and to really be light on their feet as online sellers. I mean, that's really what we enable sellers to do. It's kind of a one step above traditional market research that has involved analysts and maybe focus groups and pricing research and studying competitors. By letting them know within a few hours what is selling and letting them search by keyword, they can find not just big products like Apple Watch, but with keyword searching ability comes the ability to find what are the new hot accessories, right? For an Apple Watch or for an iPhone 6, what things are going on in pets, right? They can search by pets. We also show them eBay search data, so they can see, they can say in a given category, what were shoppers searching for most over the past week, and then they can take a look and say, well, gosh, did any of those actually sell? Were any of those offered? If none of them were offered, then they can say, well, people are searching for this and nobody's selling it. I can sell that.
Right. Well, that's cool. And where are you guys headquartered?
We're headquartered in Palo Alto.
You're kidding.
And we have offices in Toronto and Victoria.
All right.
We were founded in Canada, but our main office is now Palo Alto.
Is that where you are, or are you somewhere else?
I'm actually in Salt Lake City. We have a very distributed team. We're a very sort of modern cloud-based company.
Right.
We operate a lot like a startup, and we have people everywhere.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm about 5 miles from Palo Alto.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And what's your title?
I'm the marketing communication manager for Terapeak.
Okay. Great. All right. Well, listen, you've been really generous with your time. I took a little more than I thought.
Oh, that's totally fine. I'm always happy to talk. You can probably guess I'm a talker. So.
No, that's fun. And it'll take me a bit, post-production and all. It might take me a bit to get this together.
Sure.
But I'll let you know when it's up. And if I have any questions, I can probably handle them by email, I would think.
Yeah, great. Yeah, Mike, totally feel free to email me with any questions that you have. I'm happy to help.
Plus, I have all your email addresses and all your phone numbers, so you can run, but you can't hide.
Exactly.
Listen, Aaron, I really appreciate it.
Me too, Mike. Thanks. Have a great day.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye.